Donald's choices for cabinet and department heads in his regime have been nothing short of a disaster. Nowhere is that more obvious than in FEMA. We're 2 weeks out from the official start of hurricane season, and according to a Wall Street Journal report, FEMA staff are worried the agency is, quote, not prepared, unquote. Apparently, FEMA Administrator Eric Hooks admitted in an internal meeting that he doesn't have a plan yet. Reminder, we are 2 weeks out from hurricane season. Here's CBS News reporting on this disaster.
CBS News has obtained portions of an internal review warning the Federal Emergency Management Agency is not prepared for hurricane season, which starts June 1st. CBS's Nicole Skenga has looked over the report and joins us now with details. Nicole, what does it say?
Yeah, here is the main takeaway, John. Quote, as FEMA transforms into a smaller footprint, the intent for this hurricane season is not well understood. Thus, FEMA is not ready. John, in other words, amid staffing cuts and shortages, plus directives by this administration to further downside for disaster relief to be pushed away from the federal governments and to the states, not only do FEMA employees believe that they are not prepared for hurricane season, they don't even know what their role is, what their job will be. Other slides in this PowerPoint presentation pointed to problems with morale as well as interagency coordination.
All right, none of this is theoretical. FEMA's current unpreparedness is already in evidence. This weekend, more than 24 tornadoes hit the Midwest, leaving at least 28 people dead. St. Louis alone saw 8 miles of destruction. FEMA is still not on the ground. Here's Mayor Spencer of St. Louis on MSNBC with the details.
I can tell you that on the local level, every organization, community member, elected official has been on point. What we need right now is federal assistance. This is where FEMA and the federal government has got to come in and help communities. Our city cannot shoulder this alone. The state of Missouri cannot shoulder this alone. We need partners at the national level, at the federal level to step up and help. And this is not just true for St. Louis. Cities across the nation, when experiencing disasters such as this is what the federal government is for. We need your help.
You know, it's almost, now just go with this for a second, almost as if federal agencies exist for a reason. It's almost as if we use our tax dollars to fund them for a reason. But this is what happens after 4 decades of the Republican Party trying to convince, or I should say delude, the American people into thinking that government is the problem, when in reality, the government is us. The government exists to serve us. The government exists to help us in a time of need. That's what it's for. That is what the funding of the agency is for. And that is what the agencies themselves are for. Because this is not just an agency that's not prepared for a season that, by the way, comes every year. It's about incompetence, and it's intentional in some regard. And of course, it starts at the top. This is all happening after Donald fired former FEMA head Cameron Hilton. Why did Cameron Hilton get fired? Because he was bad at his job, you ask? No, he was fired for telling the truth. Hilton testified to Congress that dismantling FEMA would put lives at risk. The next day, he was escorted out of the building. And by the way, the whole reason that FEMA exists is so lives are not put at risk. So even Republicans are alarmed. Now, not surprisingly, Senator Susan Collins, who's also just disappointed and concerned, said, quote, I understand that appointees of the president have an obligation to support the president's proposals that affect their agencies or resign. At the same time, they also have an obligation to Congress to answer questions truthfully, which is what I think happened in this case, unquote. Yes, I'm sure Senator Collins also believes that at some point Donald Trump is going to learn his lesson, but Donald Trump does not want his agency heads telling the American people the truth, because that truth will not redound to his benefit. It will expose what a craven, crass, unprepared, incompetent leader he is. But of course, the Trump regime's lack of concern here and their lack of understanding the mandate doesn't stop there. We have much, much more here, of course. But before we go on, I just want to remind you that we here at Mary Trump Media are not corporate media. We don't bend the knee, and we are not for sale. We expose the lies of the Trump regime every day, even those they want desperately to keep buried. Independent media survives because of you. So please like and share our videos and subscribe to our channel if you're with us. Donald isn't just undermining disaster response. He's also, as we've seen over the last 3 or 4 months, crashing aviation safety too. In an astounding admission, Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy revealed that the Federal Aviation Association is buying replacement airplane parts off of eBay to keep outdated radar navigation systems working. Here he is telling Congress about his department's online shopping.
A lot of kids don't know what these are. They're floppy disks, but they don't know, what's a floppy disk? Quick note, when systems go down in the equipment that you see up here, we don't call the manufacturer to buy replacement parts for this equipment. Do you know where we go? eBay. We shop on eBay to replace parts to fix our equipment in the system that keeps you safe, keeps your family safe.
Why is he saying that as if that's a good thing? Why is he saying that as if that's something that should instill us with confidence? But this is what happens when people aren't paying enough attention. They put in charge idiots who either don't care or do not understand what their jobs are supposed to be. Everybody in charge of a federal agency under the Trump regime is incompetent, depraved, and does not have the best interests of the American people at heart. Sean Duffy has been sounding the alarm that the FAA needs support, but instead of trying to rally people around the cause, he, much like his boss, is throwing everybody else under the bus. Like he's learned it from the best, so why not? In February, he blamed Buttigieg. Buttigieg questioned the firing of hundreds of FAA employees, and Duffy fired back with a delusional Twitter rant. Some highlights were his whining about Buttigieg working from home, and when he said that Buttigieg used the Department of Transportation as a, quote, slush fund for the Green New scam, unquote. A couple of weeks ago, Duffy pointed fingers at Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, when a federal helicopter flew close to a DC airport just a couple of months after a disastrous crash between a jetliner and a helicopter, killing all people on board, happened under his watch. It was an embarrassing moment of infighting that is becoming the kind of thing that's becoming more and more frequent in the Trump regime. Now, Duffy could just have called Hegseth on the phone and worked this all out, but he wanted to complain publicly about the fact that none of this was his fault, despite the fact that he is indeed the Secretary of the Department of Transportation. But of course, we can always go back in time and blame everything on Joe Biden. All of the issues with our air traffic systems should have been updated during the COVID-19 pandemic, right? Well, guess what? That started under Donald's watch. Donald doesn't care about air safety any more than he cares about keeping people safe from contagious diseases. He's never taken accountability for anything in his life. He's not going to start now because blaming other people has always served him so well. He always emerges unscathed. The problem is that those underneath him, who also are leaders in their own right, are supposed to be, try to act the same way he does. None of these people has no idea what they're doing, which brings us to puppy murderer Christy Gnome. While FEMA and the FAA are falling apart, Homeland Security Secretary Christy Gnome is requesting a second $50 million Gulfstream jet. During a hearing last week, Representative Lauren Underwood laid into Gnome, quote, "I was horrified last Friday when we received the last-minute addition to your spend plan for fiscal 25, a new $50 million Gulfstream 5 for Secretary Gnome's personal travel coming from the Coast Guard budget. She already has a Gulfstream 5, by the way. This is a new one, unquote. Well, I have a suggestion, just in the interest of economy. There are a couple of fighter jets at the bottom of the Red Sea, thanks to Pete Hegseth. Maybe we can bring one of those up from the bottom of the ocean floor, and Gnome can use that one. But again, when it comes to their own needs, needs is the wrong word. When it comes to their getting what they want, when they're having the luxury of getting whatever they want, the sky's the limit and no budget is too big. It's only the rest of us who have to be denied, who have to scrimp and save and, work until we're 85 before we have access to our Social Security, for example. Now, as if this obscene request of Gnome's weren't enough, she's also pitching a reality show in which immigrants compete for citizenship. I mean, that sounds like something out of a dystopian Stephen King novel, but it's a reality show that the Secretary of Homeland Security has thrown her support behind. Now, this is unserious, right? It just shows you how unserious these people are about their jobs, about their responsibilities, but it's also on brand because it's inhumane. This is a perfect exemplar of this regime's attitudes. These hollow, self-serving, despicable, depraved people who continue to be in charge of this country. So I want to review quickly. FEMA is unprepared, and we are 2 weeks out from hurricane season. The FAA is bargain hunting for spare parts on eBay. Christy Gnome wants a new $50 million jet to fly her puppy murdering ass around the country, and a game show in which immigrants compete for United States citizenship. To cap all of that off, not one of these people actually knows what their responsibilities are or cares. That's as bad as it has been. It is always going to get worse with these people. I've said it before. I'll say it again, especially with Donald Trump. There is no such thing as worst. This downward slope has no bottom. So we need to be prepared for that. And moving forward, we need leaders who have experience, who understand the importance of expertise, and also who have the humility to say when they don't know something, or the maturity to admit when they've been wrong and they need to change course. Not one person in Donald Trump's regime has any of those qualities. So we, going forward, need to do better picking leaders who not just represent us, but care about what happens to us. Please take a second and like and share this video. It'd be awesome if you could subscribe to the channel. If you're listening to us in podcast form, please follow us and give the show a 5-star rating because it really does help other people find our content. Thanks.